Hello, my name is Danielle Miller, and I'm conducting my presentation on autism and intimate personal relationships. They loved me not. Do you remember playing this game as a kid? Picking flower petals to determine if someone you liked you back? Although it was a fun game to play, as we grew up, we realized that dating and relationships are not that simple. So, how do we know if someone does like us? I'll give you a moment to think about what verbal and nonverbal cues that you are aware of that can help determine someone's level of interest. Now, you might have come up with your own answers, but I will show a couple of examples. Their level of eye contact, their playful touch, smiling, their facial expressions, body language, whether they're laughing, or expressing interest in a second date. Now that we know how to assess someone's level of interest, let's come up with some ideas on how we can understand if someone is not interested in us. I'll give you some time. Here's a list of things that come to mind when I think about dating cues if someone is not interested. Maybe their lack of eye contact, their body might be facing other directions, there's no playful physical touching, they might be spending time on their phone, and they don't follow up after the date is over. So you might be thinking that these are common social understandings when it comes to dating or personal relationships. However, these quote-unquote common understandings are not always so easily interpreted, especially if you're diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. In this class, we have briefly studied this neurodevelopmental disorder in our child and adolescent onset disorder chapter. But today I will be briefly summarizing what ASD is, how it affects social interactions, how to implement an intervention plan, and how to teach social skills for those who want to make and keep meaningful social relationships. Let's review. What is autism spectrum disorder? ASD is a diagnosis for neurodevelopmental disorder in which an individual has difficulty in social interactions, communication, and behavioral processes. These three areas are vital to our participation in society. These skills are applicable to our everyday life, whether it's with family, friends, work, and internal processing. Since this is a neurodevelopmental disorder, let's take a look at what might be going on biologically. As you may recall, one of the ways that we develop and learn is through imitation learning. With this style, our brain fires with what we call mirror neurons. Mirror neurons communicate when someone is engaging in a particular action as well as when others engage in actions. When it comes to ASD, studies have shown that there is less activity in these specific cortical networks. Having a lack of function within the networks makes it increasingly difficult to try to understand what another person is experiencing and also why they may be engaging in certain behaviors. While we are on the subject of mirror neurons, let's talk about the theory of mind. The theory of mind is the ability to attribute mental states to ourselves and others, serving as one of the foundational elements for social interactions. Research suggests that there is a correlation between the theory of mind and ASD. The deficits in this area of social processing can typically lead to less emotional connections and interpersonal relationships. Before moving forward with talking about ASD and how it relates to the dating world, I wanted to discuss some common misconceptions. In a technological world, we have the ability and access to unlimited information regarding any and every subject. So one of the biggest misconceptions out there about ASD is that it's caused from vaccinations. There have been countless research and studies on a global level proving that there is no direct correlation between vaccinations and ASD. The reason people believe that is due to the fact that ASD is present in early child development, around the time when most children receive the longest of vaccinations. Today, we're still not 100% sure as to what causes ASD. However, research has shown that there is a genetic component with over 1,000 markers. Another common misconception is that those with ASD do not have the capability of feeling emotions. That is simply not true. Those with ASD are capable and do feel emotions, but the way they process and interpret those emotions are different from a neurotypical person. Another misconception is that those with ASD have an intellectual disability and cannot be independent. As we read in our text, that's not true. Prior to the creation of the umbrella for ASD, those who showed higher functioning were diagnosed with Asperger's. Lastly, I'd like to talk about how most people think ASD is obvious and that they aren't capable of functioning in society. But as I stated before, there's a large umbrella of diversity, and that every person with ASD is independent and has specific and individual needs. Now that we have reviewed what ASD is, let's discuss common intervention strategies related to teaching social skills regarding the dating world. In the next slides will be a brief overview of UCLA Peers Social Skills Intervention. The social skills that are within the context are the only scientific evidence-based intervention strategies that are available. Now, let's take a look at the list created within the intervention strategies on the do's and don'ts for first dates. As you see in the list of dating do's, we encourage that you do remember that dating is a choice. You move on if they're not interested. You move on if you are not interested. To be polite and respectful, to be honest and truthful, to keep in touch, and to ask permission before applying any physical contact. Now let's talk about the dating don'ts. We would encourage that they would not ask too many personal questions on a first date, not to share too much personal information at first, to avoid discussing any dating history. Don't assume that you're a couple. Don't be putting pressure on them. Do not disclose your feelings at first, and do not rush into the relationships. Again, you may be thinking that these are common understandings. However, those with ASD may struggle with the understanding and implementation of these concepts. All right, let's talk about flirting. Another teaching moment for the dating portion of the intervention is to discuss how you can flirt. Those with ASD often struggle with identifying social cues, both verbal and nonverbal. Providing a set list of social normal cues for flirting can help them prepare not only to express their feelings towards another, but also help them interpret and identify others' behaviors. Let's take a look at the list provided. Some nonverbal cues may include flirting with your eyes, making eye contact, giving a slight smile, practice looking away, and repeat that maybe several times. And let's look at what verbal cues we can do to flirt. One of the biggest things in this intervention plan is to help them learn how to trade information and find common interests. Ask about that person's social activities related to their common interests, to provide compliments, and even laugh at their jokes. Now, this happens naturally in a lot of settings. However, when we're teaching these social skills, it's an important way to look at ways we can let someone else know that we like them without telling them. As you already know, dating, whether you are neurotypical or not, can be very challenging. To add to that challenge, we now live in a very technologically forward world. This includes social media, online dating apps, etc. So when looking at intervention strategies, it is important to discuss online safety. Many social interactions online have been known to be misinterpreted. This can be due to the fact that we can't see the other person, we can't hear their tone, or watch their mannerisms. Something we can do is take precautions when it comes to online dating. Within the intervention, people are taught to set up video dates prior to meeting, to avoid being catfished. They are also encouraged to first meet in a public space, to also not provide any personal information such as your home address, things like that, and to let a family or friend know where the date is and what will be happening. Although I've provided a brief overview on the relationship between the neurodevelopmental disorder ASD and how it relates to interpersonal relationships, there is unlimited amount of information out there. So if this is something that you're interested in learning more about, I encourage you to do some research. This can include looking at UCLA's Peer Social Skills website, watching the documentary on Netflix called Dating on the Spectrum, looking into the field of applied behavioral analysis, possibly reading some books that I've provided here, which is the Autism Relationship Handbook, the Autism Relationship Workbook, But You Don't Look Autistic at All. Outside of books, there's also autismspeaks.org. These are just a handful of resources, but I mainly encourage you to talk to someone who has ASD. It's not our job to interpret their world, but to simply understand it. And remember, it's okay to live outside of the lines of societal expectations. Thank you.